My mother-in-law slipped something unusual into my drink when she believed I was not paying attention. A special cocktail for my favorite son-in-law, she said with a grin. I expressed my thanks and quietly swapped glasses with her husband, who constantly criticized my profession. 45 minutes afterwards, my name is Jason Morgan. I am 32 years old and a freelance photographer living in Asheville, North Carolina. I have built my career from the ground up, covering weddings and wildlife shoots for magazines. This kind of work provides the income, and I am skilled at it. Yet to my in-laws, particularly Diane, my work has never seemed sufficient. "What is this little photography hobby of yours?" Gerald would ask during family meals, hardly hiding his contempt. He was an investment banker, someone who measured achievement by square footage and stock market gains. Every Sunday dinner at their home followed the same pattern. Diane fussed over her daughter, while Gerald grilled me about my financial situation. My wife Haley would gently squeeze my hand under the table as an unspoken apology for her parents. I had spent the entire week on a wildlife project in Montana, trudging through knee-deep snow to capture images of bison for National Geographic. Exhausted as I was, Haley insisted we attend her mother's birthday dinner in just a few hours. I should have heeded that uneasy feeling in my stomach when Diane cornered me in the kitchen. The way her eyes nervously scanned the room before she handed me the drink, and the slight quiver in her hands as she spoke, all felt wrong. "I created something unique especially for you." Something felt off, but I could not figure out why. Things started to go wrong just as Haley and I met 6 years ago at an art gallery featuring my work. She was completing her master's in environmental science while I was just beginning to build my reputation. We connected immediately. She understood my urge to portray the world through photography, and I admired her dedication to preserving nature. Her parents were a different matter. From the very first encounter, Gerald made it obvious he expected someone else for his daughter, someone with a conventional office job, a retirement plan, a company vehicle, someone much like himself. Diane was more subtle, complimenting my pictures but asking when I intended to find a more secure career. She invited me to family gatherings and introduced me as the photographer rather than her son-in-law. For years I attempted to impress them. I brought fine wine to dinners, showed them my published work, and mentioned clients of high prestige. Nothing changed their opinion that I was just a temporary phase in their daughter's life, something she would eventually outgrow. Last Christmas I overheard Diane on a call saying Haley could have married Thomas, the orthopedic surgeon from a wealthy family, but she picked the artistic type. The way she hesitated before saying artistic almost made it sound like a flaw. Gerald was even more straightforward when Haley and I shared that we were trying for a baby. He pulled me aside saying children cost a lot, and I should reconsider finding a real job before bringing one into the world. I never shared these thoughts with Haley. She cared deeply for her parents despite their imperfections, and I did not want to force her into choosing sides. So I kept a smile, shook Gerald's hand firmly at every visit, praised Diane's cooking, and kept my opinions to myself. Yet there were signs I should have taken more seriously. Diane would often ask Haley to help in the kitchen. Whenever I spoke about a successful project, she would somehow exclude me from family photos. Once Gerald, while looking directly at me, suggested therapy for Haley because of her impulsive choices. I brushed it all off, believing that time would bring understanding. I was wrong. On the Friday of Diane's birthday dinner, I returned from Montana with cheeks stung by the cold wind and a memory card full of photos that would cover our mortgage payments for 3 months. Exhausted, I showered, put on a button-up shirt, and drove us to her parents' colonial-style house in the upscale part of town. The dinner began as usual. Gerald boasted about a recent business deal. Diane fussed over the table arrangements, and Haley's brother, Owen, and his wife Vanessa made polite small talk. I sipped a beer quietly, counting down the moments until we could leave. After the main course, Diane announced she had prepared her famous sangria for dessert and disappeared into the kitchen. I offered to help carry glasses, and that's when I noticed something unusual. There were 2 glasses set apart from the rest. As I stepped inside, Diane quickly poured a drop from a small vial into one of these glasses. It was not a typical moment. The vial was transparent and had no scent, serving neither as a garnish nor a flavor enhancer. She quickly hid it away the moment she heard my footsteps. "Oh, Jason, I have this ready," she said with an overly bright tone. "This one is just for you, a special recipe for my favorite son-in-law." My throat tightened as I noticed the glass held a faint film floating on the surface, catching the light in a strange way. "Let me help you carry these," I offered, taking both glasses she had arranged in the dining room. Gerald was checking his phone and barely glanced up when I approached. "Sangria, sir," I said, placing the tampered glass in front of him instead of taking it for myself. I observed him drink, using the excuse of preferring water with my dessert. About 45 minutes later, Gerald was visibly pale, sweating, and urgently rushing to the bathroom. The violent sounds of his sickness echoed throughout the house. Diane's face went pale as she realized what had taken place. Her eyes met mine across the table, and in that instant, I understood two things with full certainty. My mother-in-law had attempted to poison me, and she was aware that I knew. I did not react or confront her, instead quietly eating my chocolate cake, while Haley hurried to tend to her father. Amid the ensuing chaos, Gerald insisted it must have been food poisoning, and Diane nervously muttered something about bad shellfish. I discreetly pocketed the untouched glass meant for me. Something inside me had shifted. The anger I felt was not fiery or impulsive, but cold and calculated. I realized I would not simply let this go, yet I also would not engage in their game. I was going to respond on my own terms. They confronted them precisely as they were. On Monday after dinner, I took the glass to Jason, a former client who managed a toxic psychology lab, either personal or professional. He inquired when I explained what I required. "Family matter," I responded. 3 days later, he contacted me. There were benzodiazepines in that drink, nothing deadly but enough to render someone unconscious for hours, possibly causing some memory loss. "Where did you obtain this?" I thanked him and requested a written report. That night I did not reply to his question. I told Haley I wanted to skip Sunday dinner for a while. I needed to focus on an approaching exhibition. She was disappointed but understood. I did not share the test results with her yet, since I needed additional information first. During the following 2 weeks I conducted some investigation. Diane had prescriptions for Xanax from 3 different doctors. She had been doubling and tripling her doses for years. There were also rumors about her circulating in town, odd behavior at a neighbor's party, allegations of stolen jewelry at her country club, stories her family had worked hard to suppress. I gathered everything and waited for the right moment. It arrived when Haley mentioned her mother needed photos for a social media profile and specifically asked if I would take them. Surprised by the request, Haley said she agreed. The next Saturday I arrived at their house alone, carrying a camera bag in one hand and a sealed envelope in the other. Diane was waiting, dressed expensively with flawless makeup. Gerald was present as well. "At the office," she said calmly before we begin. I lowered my voice and said, "I thought you might want to see this." I handed her the envelope containing the toxicology report, along with copies of her numerous prescriptions. Her hands shook as she read. "This is impossible," she whispered. "I would never." "We both understand what happened," I interrupted. "What I don't know is why." Her expression turned cold. "You are not good enough for my daughter and never will be. A man should offer safety, not pictures, and drugging your daughter's husband provides security." I kept my tone steady. "It was not meant to hurt you," she snapped back, "just making you ill. Making you miss that absurd gallery opening you've been mentioning for months. Show Haley that you cannot be trusted." I let that settle. "Here's what happens next," I finally said. "You will confess to Gerald what you did. Then you will both begin treating me with respect. Not because you have suddenly changed your minds about me, but because the alternative means Haley discovering who her real parents are." Diane laughed, but it was hollow. "She will never believe you over us. I picked up my camera bag, maybe not, but she will trust the lab report and prescription records and also the neighbors you have driven away. Are you ready to risk your bond with your daughter on that?" I left without snapping a single photo. That night, Diane called Haley in tears, claiming I acted improperly during our session, saying I was hostile and threatening, when Haley confronted me because I could no longer keep the truth hidden. I revealed everything: the laboratory report, the prescriptions, even text messages from her mother, which had grown increasingly hostile over the years. "My mother wouldn't do this," she insisted repeatedly, but her tone was unconvincing. The following day she challenged her parents herself. I was absent, but when she came back home, her eyes were red with tears. She whispered, "My father says it is all a misunderstanding." Then she added softly, "He claims they are trying to drive a wedge between us because you feel insecure about your career." I simply nodded, expecting this reaction. "What do you think?" I asked. She said nothing, just curled up in bed and turned her back on me. I had resisted, yet somehow I had fallen further into their scheme. Now I was the villain in their narrative, and they had successfully sown doubt in the one person whose judgment mattered most to me. For 2 weeks, Haley barely spoke to me. She went to her parents' home alone and returned with tear-streaked eyes along with fresh uncertainty. I threw myself into my work, spending endless hours in my studio, waiting for the turmoil to subside. Then, a package arrived addressed solely to me. No return address, just my name written in handwriting I did not recognize. Inside, there was a USB drive and a note that said, "You should see this," attributed to Vanessa, Owen's wife. The drive contained video files, home security recordings from Gerald's and Diane's house. The timestamps indicated the evening of the dinner. There was Diane in the kitchen, clearly adding something to a drink. Then, there was me walking in, taking... In the glasses, there was Gerald drinking from the tampered glass, but that was not all. There was additional footage taken after we had left, showing Diane yelling at Gerald, accusing him of drinking from the incorrect glass. Gerald responded loudly, "This is not the first time you have done something like this." I watched the video 3 times, struggling to fully grasp what I was seeing. It not only confirmed Diane's behavior, but also revealed a disturbing pattern. It showed that Gerald was aware. The next clip was from 2 days after the dinner. Diane and Gerald were arguing in their living room about me. "He knows what you did," Gerald said. Diane responded, "So what?" Then she added coldly, "It is his word against mine. Haley will never side with him over family, and if she does, she is not the daughter I raised." Diane continued, "Don't worry, I have already begun talking to her about their marriage problems, planting doubts. By the time I am done, she will be filing for divorce and believing it was her own choice." I shut my laptop, my hands trembling. This was not just about me. It was a well-planned attempt to manipulate Haley's life and isolate her from anyone who did not conform to their expectations. And they had been doing it for years. I immediately called Vanessa. I asked her why she had sent me this. Vanessa spoke quietly. "Because they did the same to me when I married Owen. They tried to tear us apart for 2 years. They claimed I was not good enough. It almost succeeded." I asked why she had not told us before. "Owen does not know," she admitted. "He worships his father and believes everything he says. I've tried to warn him, but he thinks I'm wrong." I simply could not stand by and watch them do this to someone else. The very next day I received a message from Gerald. He suggested, "We should have a conversation man to man, no wives involved." I agreed to meet him at his country club. He was waiting in a private room, sipping bourbon as he began. "Jason, family matters are always complex. My wife can be difficult and very protective, but she means well." He added, "Drugging someone means well?" I asked in disbelief. He dismissed my concern with a wave of his hand, calling it a misunderstanding. "Diane takes medication for anxiety. She likely mixed up the glasses. I also have security footage." Gerald's expression shifted immediately, turning cold and calculating. He asked, "What is it that you want? Money? Is this about finances?" "I always suspected you married Haley for money." I answered firmly, "I want you both to leave us alone. Stop trying to convince Haley that I am not good enough. Stop interfering in our marriage." Gerald leaned forward and smirked. "You really think this is the first time we've dealt with someone like you? People who want to exploit our family." He chuckled, adding, "Haley will return home where she belongs. She always does. Ask her about Thomas. Ask her about the fiancé before you." A chill ran through me at his words. "What are you talking about? Haley was engaged before she met you. He was a nice guy, a doctor, but we didn't trust his background. It took us 6 months to convince her he wasn't right for her. She broke it off and came home crying to Daddy." He smiled triumphantly. "History repeats itself, son." On the way back, I called Haley's college roommate, Bethany, to ask about Thomas. "Oh God," she said, "that was a terrible situation. Everything seemed perfect for her, but her parents convinced her he was unfaithful by planting false proof. He attempted to explain the truth, yet by then she no longer trusted him. The pattern was unmistakable. This was not only about me, but about controlling their daughter's life entirely, and they had done it before. I did not confront Haley at once. Instead, I began collecting all possible evidence. I contacted Thomas, who was hesitant to talk at first, But once I described the situation, he shared old emails between him and Haley that clearly showed how her parents systematically tore their relationship apart. I reached out to other ex-boyfriends and past friends of Haley who had mysteriously disappeared from her life. A pattern appeared. Anyone who encouraged her independence was slowly pushed away. Vanessa contributed more security camera footage, revealing Diane and Gerald discussing their plans for us. "Once they divorce, we will persuade her to move back home," said Gerald in one recording. "She can run the foundation and meet appropriate men." I put everything on a single drive, then invited Owen and Vanessa for dinner, without Haley knowing I was about to shatter her family's facade. Over dessert, I linked my laptop to the television and said, "There is something you both need to see." For the next hour we watched all the recordings together. Haley remained motionless, with a pale expression. Owen shook his head repeatedly, whispering, "That cannot be my parents," under his breath, while it continued. Haley looked at me with tears pouring down her cheeks. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" she asked. I answered, "Because I needed you to witness everything firsthand. I revealed not just what they did to me, but also how they have been treating you your entire life." Owen jumped up, furious. "You have tampered with these videos. My parents would never do that." Vanessa placed a hand on his arm and said, "They did it to us as well, Owen. Why do you think their attitude toward me changed only after we had James? A grandchild gave them power over us." Owen's face lost all color. "You never told me." "I tried," she whispered, "but you refused to listen." Later that night, Haley climbed into bed beside me and said quietly, "I need time to absorb all this, but I believe you, and I regret doubting you." The following morning, Diane called, and Haley put the phone on speaker. "Sweetheart, I was thinking you should stay with us for some time," Diane said brightly. "Your father and I are concerned about your marriage. Relationships are difficult, and sometimes a break can bring clarity." Haley interrupted calmly. "I've already watched the videos." Silence filled the room before Diane replied, "What videos? The security footage showing you drugging Jason's drink? Or you and Dad scheming to ruin my marriage?" Haley paused. "Whatever they've shown you has been doctored deliberately. You know Jason has always envied our family." Her voice became resolute. "Tonight we are all coming over. Owen, Vanessa, Jason, and me. We will confront this as a family. No more deceit." After hanging up, Haley turned to me with determination. "They will deny everything. They will try to turn this around on you." I nodded, knowing exactly what would happen. "So, what is our strategy?" For the first time in many weeks, I smiled and said, "I believe it is time for your parents to meet the true me, the one who does more than just take pictures but understands how to tell a meaningful story." That evening, we arrived at Gerald and Diane's house, carrying my camera gear. Owen and Vanessa were already there, sitting tensely in the living room. Gerald appeared confident and said, "I understand there has been a misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding," I interrupted while setting up my tripod. "I am recording this conversation for the family archives." Diane immediately objected. "This is private family business." "Precisely," I replied. "Family business, and I am family, even if you have worked hard to change that." For nearly 2 hours we revealed everything. The drink. Gerald and Diane denied every accusation, naturally calling me unstable and manipulative. But with every denial, I played another video clip or showed another email. Their faces turned paler, their refusals grew weaker. Finally, Haley stood up and said, "I love you both. You are my parents. But what you have done is unforgivable. You no longer have control over my life." Owen agreed, nodding. "We are adults who make our own decisions, choose our own partners and paths." Diane began to cry, not out of guilt, but because she realized she was losing control. Gerald just stared, stunned as if he could not grasp that his children were standing against him. As we got ready to leave, I handed Gerald a USB drive. I said, "This contains all the footage, the emails, the testimonies. It belongs to you." He looked at me with suspicion and asked, "What is this supposed to mean?" I answered, "It means I have no intention of damaging your reputation by sharing this with anyone else. That would hurt Haley, and I would never allow that." I hesitated for a moment, but added, "However, if you ever try to interfere in our marriage again, or attempt to manipulate Haley or speak against me, copies will go to every member of your country club, your business colleagues, and your precious social circle." For the first time since meeting him, Gerald looked at me with something close to respect. "I underestimated you," he said. "Yes," I replied simply. 6 months later, Haley and Owen began therapy to heal from the harm their parents had inflicted. Diane and Gerald kept their distance, sending occasional messages but honoring the boundaries we had set. Then, during the holidays, they invited us all to a dinner, signaling a fresh start. The invitation said Haley wanted to see her parents, and they were making an effort. I agreed, though I was not foolish enough to think they had truly changed. When we arrived, everything seemed normal. Diane had prepared a sumptuous meal, and Gerald was cordial, inquiring sincerely about my latest projects. After dinner, Gerald invited me into his study. Pouring me a glass of scotch, he said, "I have a proposition for you. I've been considering your career. Photography has been going well. Have you ever thought about diversifying? I could offer you a position in my company on the junior partner track. The compensation would be quite significant." I accepted the glass, but did not drink from it. "Why would you do that your family?" he asked smoothly. "I admire how you managed the difficulty. You shielded my daughter, while standing firm. That is what a true man does." I placed the glass down without a sip. "I am grateful for the offer, but I must decline." His smile narrowed. "Jason, be practical. This is a gesture of goodwill, a chance for us to progress." "No," I repeated firmly. "This is just another attempt to control. You cannot purchase me, Gerald, and you cannot bear that Haley loves me exactly as I am." "Do not be naive," he muttered, dropping the pretense everyone has a price. I rose to my feet. "That is where you err, and why you will never understand your daughter." I moved back to the dining room, where Diane was showing Haley photo albums. "Look at these," she said. "You were so joyful when you lived at home." Haley caught my gaze from across the room. She could tell from my face that something had happened. I gave a small nod, and she stood up. "Ah, Mom, Dad," she declared loudly, "I have something to tell you." Everyone turned their attention to her. "Jason and I are expecting a baby. I am 3 months pregnant." The astonishment on their faces was honest. Diane was the first to recover quickly, moving to hug her daughter with tears in her eyes. Gerald came over more cautiously, looking between Haley and me. "Congratulations," he said stiffly. "Thank you." He responded quietly, lowering his voice so that only he could hear. "This child will never become a pawn in your schemes. I promise you that." His expression grew stern, but he gave a nod once he grasped the meaning behind my words. That evening, as we drove back home, Haley held my hand tightly and said, "They will never change, will they?" I answered truthfully, "No, but they will have to accept it now." About 3 weeks later, a certified letter arrived from Gerald's lawyer. Inside was a deed to a house, our house, which we had been renting all along, alongside legal papers creating a trust fund for our yet unborn child. No notes accompanied these documents, no strings attached, simply a clear and final transfer of assets. This was not an apology. Gerald was incapable of such a gesture. Rather, it stood as perhaps the only form of acknowledgement he could offer that we had won. Our daughter was born during the summer, and we named her Eliza in honor of my grandmother. When Diane and Gerald visited us at the hospital, they brought gifts but kept a polite distance. They admired the baby, took some pictures, and left without any attempts to lecture us on parenting or money. Months went by, and our relationship with them settled into something close to normal. They never said sorry for their past actions, but they no longer tried to control Haley's life or interfere with my career. One evening, as I was sorting through photos in my studio, Haley came in holding Eliza. "Mom called," she said. "She wants us to come for Christmas." I looked up from the computer and asked, "What do you want to do?" Haley replied, "I think we should go." When we stayed at a hotel instead of their house, we left whenever we wanted without losing any time. Eliza smiled and nodded, saying it sounded reasonable as she settled beside me, gently rocking the baby. "You know, I used to believe success meant pleasing my parents, getting their approval, living up to their expectations." She glanced down at our daughter, then back at me. "Now I understand it is about making decisions I am proud of and standing by the people I love." 2 weeks before Christmas, a large envelope arrived from Gerald. Оставляем, поскольку имя часто встречается в англоязычных странах. Inside was a glossy brochure featuring his company's annual report. My photos were scattered throughout, landscapes, portraits, architectural images, The work I had created on my own terms without his control. A short note said, "Hired the best photographer I know. Thought you would want a copy." It was not about forgiveness or making peace. It felt different. Respect, maybe the recognition that I had succeeded by my own rules, not his. I did not call to thank him. We both knew this was no expression of gratitude, but an acknowledgement of new limits and a changed reality. That spring, I launched my own gallery in the downtown Greenville. At the grand opening, Haley stood beside me with Eliza resting on her hip. My parents flew in from Oregon. Friends and clients filled the space, admiring the photos I had taken through the years. Gerald, оставляем, поскольку имя часто встречается в англоязычных странах, and Diane, оставляем, так как имя достаточно распространено и звучит универсально, also came, but only stayed briefly near the evening's end. Diane held Eliza for a moment, while Haley carefully watched over them both. Gerald shook my hand and nodded at the photographs with sincere approval before leaving without offering any advice on how I should manage my business. That night, as we were locking up, Haley asked, "Do you think they have changed?" I thought about it deeply and replied, "No, but they have come to accept that they cannot change us, and sometimes that is enough." Later, while sitting on the porch watching the stars appear above the mountains with Eliza asleep in her crib upstairs, I came to a realization I had never fully expressed before. I had not succeeded by following Gerald and Diane's rules. Instead, I triumphed by refusing to engage in their game at all. I held my ground, defended what was important, and shaped my life according to my own understanding of success, not through tactics or deception, but through honesty and steady determination. Ultimately, this was the most fulfilling form of revenge, living well by my own standards with the family I loved by my side.